Jai Prabhuji. Today we are at our second class of the course about the book Experimenting with the Truth. In the previous class we had an introduction, and today we are going to take a look at the layout of the course. So this course is going to constitute 9 different sections or chapters. These are not chapters that exist in the book itself, but only of the course. And in each of this section, we are going to explore a different angle of the retroprogressive yoga through the articles, through Prabhuji's words that are relevant to this particular angle. We might also use other materials, lectures, and books or articles, and sometimes internal talks also when they will be relevant to explore the specific angle. On purpose, I don't want to say topic. Of course, we will also use the word topic when we describe it, but the reason I don't use the word topic is because the retroprogressive yoga deals only with one topic, and that is truth. But we are going to look at different points of view maybe, or maybe you can call it different languages or different terminologies that describe the retroprogressive yoga, which is in fact everything that Prabhuji does is only reveals the retroprogressive yoga in all his books, lectures, and in his life. He lives the retroprogressive yoga and he expresses it in the materials. So this is what we are going to do in this course. We will visit each and every part, aspect, we can say, of this course. So this course will be divided to 9 different windows through which we will look at these truths, and we will examine them separately. And again, today we are just going to present what they will be, what they will consist of, which articles, and very briefly what they are going to include, each of the chapters in this course. So the first chapter of this course, a different section, will be dedicated to the topic of the master-disciple relationship. And under this category will fall 4 articles. We selected 4 articles through which we are going to explore this phenomenon, the master-disciple relationship, look into it and try to understand the essence of it. And the articles will include first the article that deals with the question, who you consider a spiritual seeker? What is a spiritual seeker? And the reason we chose this article as the first one, because the first and foremost, the most important foundation of every disciple is necessarily the spiritual seeking. In other words, every disciple must be first a spiritual seeker. If he is not a spiritual seeker, he has nothing to do in this relationship. This is what motivates him to be in this relationship and to stay in this relationship and to maintain this relationship. If there is no spiritual seeking, again, this master-disciple relationship will no longer be genuine. And at the same time, every spiritual seeker, every person that is thirsty for truth, interested in truth, he is a disciple in his nature, even though he might not yet be engaged in such a relationship in this world. In his nature, he is a disciple because he has the 2 qualifications that we can say can constitute a disciple, which are first that he desires truth. He wants truth. This is what interests him. This is what attracts him. This is what fascinates him. And at the same time, he recognizes that he is not in truth, that he doesn't live in truth. So he wants to learn it. He wants to inquire into it through whatever means will be available from him. It can be a person, or if he didn't meet yet a person that he recognizes as qualified to give him such knowledge, he will grab it in whatever opportunity life can present to him. And we have examples of personalities that became disciples even though they didn't have masters in their nature, because they were curious, fascinated, more than fascinated, determined to seek truth, to find truth. And this is what turns every spiritual seeker to be a disciple in his nature. And this is why this topic is so connected. And in this article, Prabhuji is going to give us a lot of clarification regarding not just who he considers spiritual seeker, but what is spiritual seeking. And even this we can break down even more. What is seeking? What does it mean to search? And what is spiritual? A word that we can use pretty often, but it can mean different things. It can mean different things in different contexts, and maybe for different personalities, and maybe in different schools. But we will see what is spiritual in the eyes of the retroprogressive yoga and for Prabhuji. What do we mean when we use the word spiritual? And this also will serve us moving forward in this course. When we say spiritual, and Prabhuji says spiritual, and he uses it sometimes in his writings, what does it mean? The second article that is going to be discussed in this chapter of the master-disciple relationship is explanation about the master-disciple relationship. Prabhuji is asked about this relationship, and he gives us explanation about what it is in his eyes. The third article has an interesting question. The question is if this relationship, or if accepting a master, can in any way postpone my enlightenment. Can it prevent from me something that I would otherwise maybe be more free to search? And Prabhuji goes deep into this interesting and important question. And I think it can teach us a lot about, again, this relationship, about the spiritual seeking, and about some more aspects that we're going to explore when we'll see this article, when we look at it at depth. But this is the general question that is discussed. And the fourth article that is going to be discussed in this section is article that deals with the authority. This term, what is an authority? The question that is asked, that Prabhuji is asked, is on what authority do you base your teachings? And in my opinion, if we need to summarize what Prabhuji says in this article in one point, I would say that Prabhuji's answer is that the only authority that anyone has is his own or her own authority. And this is relevant to the master-disciple relationship in two ways. One is if we look at the aspect of the master, of someone who speaks about truth. I don't even speak about guide other people, that Prabhuji doesn't do a lot these days, only in a very low scale. But he speaks his truth. And the question is, on what authority, again, do you base these words? And Prabhuji says, my only authority is myself. I only speak about what I see. Everything that I say is based on what I am. And this can give us an indication also to other personalities that spoke about the ultimate reality. And another aspect, or another relevance of this principle that is conveyed in this article, that every authority is based on oneself, is the aspect of the disciple. Because what we can understand from it is that even though as disciples, or in other contexts in life, we can accept some external authority, we can follow some inspiration, some guidance, we can even adopt some religion or some philosophy. We are always the ones that are in charge of this decision. We are the decision makers. In other words, we are always the authority. Even if we choose to follow a different authority, we are always the origin of this decision, and therefore we cannot take an external authority, because it will always be our own authority, our own internal decision. And this doesn't only mean at one point in time, but every second. A disciple must be in this consciousness that he follows whatever he follows, if he follows a master, out of his understanding, out of his or her intention, out of his or her freedom, and out of his or her responsibility. And this is a point that is extremely important to understand, and in my opinion, it's widely misunderstood regarding this relation of master and disciple. And this will conclude this section of the master and disciple. We have 4 articles in this first chapter. The second chapter or section of this course is going to deal with the mind, an important aspect that is dealt with in length and in depth in all religions and by different personalities in different schools and in the retroprogressive yoga. Of course, we said that the retroprogressive yoga only speaks about one topic, and that is truth. And we also said in the previous class, in the introduction, that Prabhuji explains that the truth cannot be spoken about. It cannot be verbalized, that he never speaks the truth. He only indicates to the truth. He only speaks about the truth. But what can be spoken about is the veil that blocks our ability to be in truth or to see the truth. And this is going to be explored in this article that we are going to visit and try to understand. And in this section, we are going also to review 4 articles, 4 questions that are asked regarding the topic of the mind, the aspect of the mind. The questions are, what do you mean by human conditioning? Getting rid of the mind, about getting rid of the mind, an article. How can I control the mind, or at least pacify it? Why does my mind resist meditating? And Prabhuji will give us a lot of light and clarification about the nature of the mind, what it consists of. And an answer to the questions, how to pacify, how to control, why does my mind resist meditating? Questions that are very natural for us on this path of, we can say path of meditation, of yoga, of trying to transcend the mental activity. Prabhuji will not give so much answers that will satisfy the questions or that will satisfy the mind, that is the origin of these questions. But he may convey an approach that can help us disperse some illusion. The third chapter will deal with some more how to question, some more how to transcend. We had a few in the second chapter that deals with the mind naturally. And in the third chapter, we'll continue to explore similar questions that in essence are asking how to transcend. Let's review the questions. So we have, could you give me some advice how to improve my meditation? Again, similar to why does my mind resist meditating, etc. Then the second article that we'll discuss here, what can you do to become enlightened? The third question, was your enlightenment a result of your practices? That's in essence, I think, it's similar to the second question. What can be done so I can be enlightened, right? This is the bottom line. And the fourth one is, how can I improve my relationship with others? It's a little different field, doesn't speak about yoga and meditation, but in essence, it's also dealing with how can I transcend myself? How can I transcend my conditioning? What can I do to transcend? And in all these questions, we see our desire to pursue truth. So I think one typical reaction to truth can be to reject it, or to underestimate it, or to ignore it when coming in touch with knowledge of truth. But another typical reaction of the ego can be to desire to get it right away. So after we maybe sense that it's something beneficial, maybe we sense that it's attractive for us, that it can give us release. Maybe we even see a lot of sense in the philosophy and in the message that it can really help us transcend the root cause of the suffering. So now the natural reaction that we have is, so how can I do it? How can I get it? What are the steps that I can follow to know this truth, to be in this truth, to live this truth? And then we're going to face a long path, most likely, most of us, of effort to transcending, from when we understand that we want to transcend until we are able to what Prabhuji calls the jump. There is a long path, and this is in this long path we are going to have a lot of questions, and thanks to these questions we get a lot of lights from in general and from Prabhuji in this particular context. When again, as we said in regard to the previous section, Prabhuji will not give us a recipe or a method or any action that we should do or should not do or stop to do or something that we need to improve. But he will only shed light on these very aspirations even to transcend the mind. And what are we dealing with that can help us to get closer to truth? Again, not thanks to some method or some steps that we can follow, but by bringing some light into the cloudiness of the mind. This is how I see Prabhuji's words. That they are able to weaken a little our mental conditioning, to soften a little our way of seeing, our way of perceiving, which is the mind. And this is, I think, what happens in the association with Prabhuji. And this is what we are going to receive in these articles. And of course, we are going to explore and analyze and try to understand all the ideas that are presented also in an intellectual and logical sense. Freedom. What do you mean by freedom? Isn't responsibility an obstacle to freedom? Can freedom be misused? So our fourth chapter will deal with this important aspect in life, which is freedom. Are we free? How are we free? How are we not free? In what sense we are free? In what sense we are not free? We'll go into these fundamental questions in all schools of thoughts, in all times, and also very fundamental in every human being's experience, necessarily. What is freedom? Is there a freedom? So we're going to delve into the contemplation that Prabhuji had regarding this topic with himself, which is quite extensive. There are 3 articles inside this book. Inside these 22 articles, 3 are dealing with this topic of freedom. And this will constitute our 4th chapter in this course. The 5th chapter of this course is going to deal with sexuality. Prabhuji is asked regarding his position about sexuality. In this section, we will have just one article where Prabhuji answers this question. And what Prabhuji answers, much like in many other cases regarding many other questions, that life is not a problem. That spiritual life is not a problem. That nature is not a problem. The body is not a problem. And also sex is not a problem. But what complicates every experience in our life is our mental projection. The root cause of all problems, of all complications, of all distress is our mental analysis, our mental expectations, our mental projections. In the previous class, we spoke about the fact that the retroprogressive yoga does not favor any object or any phenomenon. And in the same way, it doesn't sees as unqualified any object or any phenomenon. In the sense that every object or phenomenon are worthy of our observation, of examination. And for sure, an aspect that is inherent in us as human beings, the sexual aspect, is something every human being needs to face in this way or another. It's part of our experience. And therefore, what is important in the eyes of Prabhuji and in the eyes of the retroprogressive yoga is the observation, is the consciousness. And this is true whether we walk on a path of celibacy or on any other path. Prabhuji will never recommend something to do or not to do or to stop doing or to change. But if he recommends anything, is only observation, awareness, consciousness in everything that we do. And this will also be expressed in this article. Okay, 6th chapter, we are moving into the topic of religion. The question that will be discussed in this section, there will be 3 questions that are: what is the greatest damage that religion has caused to humanity? Why do we not preach? And why it causes you so much discomfort to be considered a guru? In all these questions, the answer that Prabhuji will give will provide for us contemplation about this topic of religion and information about Prabhuji's view regarding religions and the religious phenomenon. Prabhuji, we will see how he very much respects, admires, loves, appreciates the beauty that religions brought to us. This is something that is very evident in Prabhuji's life and teachings. Cannot be ignored. At the same time, Prabhuji recognizes the problematic approach that the same religions brought to this planet. The complication. We spoke about the mental complication. An approach, the dogmatic approach, we can say, that can cause us as aspirants on an evolutionary process to develop, to see, to know ourselves, to discover ourselves, an approach that can be a hindrance in this development because of the dogmatic messages that it can give us. And this is in general Prabhuji's view about religions. We're going to go deep into it in these 3 articles and get more wisdom from Prabhuji. I would like to read 2 sentences from the 2nd article where Prabhuji explains this point, that he can give us some kind of a summary, I think, to Prabhuji's approach regarding the religious phenomenon. So we're going in these articles to explore both the dogmatic religious phenomenon, what Prabhuji can call religiousness, and also the authentic religious phenomenon, which is important and worthy of noting. Too many theologies and philosophies have ended up being obstacles in the evolutionary path of many people. They begin as bridges that are meant to unite, but become walls that separate and hinder development. So after exploring the religious phenomenon, including its problematic aspect, its dogmatic aspect, we are going to move in a transition into the devotional aspect of all religions. Prabhuji speaks about bhakti or devotion. Bhakti is a Sanskrit word for devotion. And I think we can sense in this article a lot of devotion. That it's not just an explanation or information, but also some testimony. And I would like to read the text out of this article that I think can give us a good taste, that in my eyes it's a very good testimony of devotion. And this is one of these texts that Prabhuji writes in a more poetic way. It's something that we mentioned in the previous class in the introduction, when we read the part where Prabhuji speaks about his life and speaks how it is a flight beyond the temporary and the eternal. And we spoke that sometimes words don't explain to us something, but direct us to something, give us some taste. And I very much think it's existent in this article and in this specific text that we are going to read. In a worldly romance, your heart responds to a glance, a touch, or a kiss. In devotion, your heart vibrates with the breeze that caresses the trees, the moon's reflection on a lake, or the perfume of flowers in the air. Your soul dances with the song of birds and the silence of the forest. Wherever you look, you recognize the magic, the mystery, and the divine secret. You hear it in the rustle of the wind, the sound of the waves, and in the rumble of river rapids. You feel it in the fragrance of the soul after the rain and in the salty air by the ocean. The 8th chapter is going to deal with Buddhism. Prabhuji is asked about the Buddhist concept of emptiness, or what is called in Pali shunyata. and he explains about it. Buddhism is a very good language to present the Siddhanta of the retroprogressive yoga. Siddhanta is, we can say, the ultimate view. What is the conclusion of this specific school, of this specific realized being? What was the message? If we need to say in one sentence or two sentences, what is the point? This is something that if we, I can imagine if a professor, either in Eastern philosophy or Western philosophy, come across the message, he can ask, what is the Siddhanta? What is the point? What is the message? And this is also important. We say many times that Prabhuji doesn't give any dogma, doesn't give any definite explanation about truth, but he does have a Siddhanta. And the Siddhanta of the retroprogressive yoga is that only consciousness is. And this is very similar to the Siddhanta of Buddhism that speaks about emptiness or absence of everything that we can perceive, of all the world of names and forms, of ourselves, of any concept, of any thought, of any idea, of any word, even the word emptiness, even the word realization or nirvana. Everything is empty of existence. These are words, these are indications, but they don't have substance of their own. And this is again very similar to Prabhuji's view of reality, experience of reality, and explanation of reality. Can speaks about consciousness, Prabhuji can speaks about perception, and essentially he sees the reality similar to the Siddhanta of the Buddhism, also similar to the Hindu non-dual school, the Advaita Vedanta, that sees the reality as only Brahman exists. All these words of names and forms and ourselves do not exist as we see. It does not have a ultimate reality. It has only relative reality. Similar idea also in Buddhism. And in this article, Prabhuji will explain his view through this language of Buddhism and simultaneously explain what is shunyata, what is emptiness in Buddhism. Prabhuji explains in this article, emptiness does not refer to a mere lack of matter, but to the absence of an entity independent of every other object or phenomenon. According to this, objects and entities exist only because the mind defines them as such. So in the 9th chapter, we are going to speak about an important distinction of the retroprogressive yoga. That is this distinction between ego and individuality. Prabhuji explains in this article that we will read. In this section, we will read only one article. Prabhuji explains that many times we think that once we will transcend the egoic phenomenon, we are going to look very similar, to think similarly, to speak similarly, to act similarly. And that this is not just different, but maybe opposite than the truth. Because only as egos, we are in fact similar. We have differences, of course, but in essence we are very similar, very predicted. And this is something we can all witness. In essence, we are all more or less acting out of the same mechanism, the same intention. But what Prabhuji says is that only once transcending this egoic phenomenon, what we mention as the mental conditioning, and being established in truth, then we will really be authentic. Then individuality will be expressed. Then we will for sure be very different than one another. And this is why Prabhuji explains in this article, realized beings which means personalities that transcended the egoic phenomenon, are necessarily very unique, very different than one another. Each one renews something. Each one brings something that wasn't before. They never repeat each other. They never recycle information because they are authentic, direct expression of themselves, of the reality as it is expressed through their unique, we can say body-mind complex, not complex anymore, but their body and mind in the specific way that reality expresses. And this is why in the spiritual path, our aspiration is to transcend the ego, to transcend the mechanism that causes us confusion and illusion and misery, but not to transcend our uniqueness, our authentic expression. And this will always be maintained in a healthy, we can say, spiritual evolution or retroprogressive evolution. This distinction, the respect to the individual and the rejection of the egoic phenomenon only. So this will conclude our course, this topic. It also concludes our class of today. In the next class, we are going to start to review the article that deals with the spiritual seeking, which will be an article that we are examining in the context of the master-disciple relationship. We said we are going to visit 4 articles, and this will be the first one. And we will meet Prabhuji's contemplation about this topic. What is spiritual? What is seeking? What is spiritual seeking? What are we seeking? Who is a spiritual seeker? Thank you for joining. Jai Prabhuji.